Hey guys, so I've decided that everything I've stood for the past 4-5 years is actually alt-right misinformation. All the info I've seen and passed on, it's probably confirmation bias. I was just cherry picking. It's hard to admit, but I went down the rabbit's hole and ended up clogging the pipeline. I would say I fell victim to the slippery slope, but I recently learned on Reddit that that's a logical fallacy, and it's totally different than a pipeline, which is real. Not that I rely on Reddit to learn what's true or not, it's just that after my change of heart, I happen to rigorously agree with Reddit on everything. Though I was totally brainwashed by the alt-right, I'm sure that this time around I've formed all my opinions completely free from the influence of any kind of propaganda. As weird as it may sound, I feel like I've become immune to the effects of media and marketing. What can I say? I'm just built different. The fact that I can't see any left-wing equivalent to the cult-like group behavior I'm so eager to point out in alt-right circles doesn't mean I'm biased, even though I am now a communist. Truth is, there aren't any pathological manifestations of progressivism. It's not my fault you haven't watched enough ContraPoints videos to recognize that. Even if such an unbelievable thing as an environment where you're forced to be left-wing or be excommunicated were real, it'd be a good thing, because you'd be better for it. Oh, you're still right-wing? Honey, I've been through that phase. Trust me, you'll get over it. Listen, I've watched my fair share of anti-SJW compilations, but I matured past that. I also started smoking weed, did DMT, became trans, or all of the above right around the same time. But I assure you that's unrelated. You only disagree because you're still spiraling down Jordan Peterson's and Ben Shapiro's holes. And no, I will not elaborate further on what in particular is wrong with your beliefs. I'll just imply that they're the result of trauma and social influences. You became conservative because you were abused. I cut off my genitals because I rationally thought it through. We are not the same. I mean, if I admitted that it were about more than inoculation, I would basically be acknowledging the existence of factual data on your side, which necessarily I would have to contend with. And I already know I can't. So I'll just settle for saying free will doesn't exist. Propaganda works on you whether you want it to or not. It's not your fault or decision. For this reason, I'll pretend like we should have compassion on converts, but you can bet your bottom dollar I'll look the other way when you get doxxed and canceled by my cohorts for your previous viewpoints. Don't hate the player, hate the game. As the understanding empath that I am, I can sense that every person who disagrees with me is just confused, and only ever adopts controversial or dissenting views because they're social group. I also sense that this is totally not projection because I'm susceptible to peer pressure and think everyone else is like me. It's actually a normal thing for people to oscillate radically from one end of the spectrum to the other, and not a symptom of over-socialization. I'm not the fickle, mentally ill chameleon who changes my identity whenever it's expedient. You're the psychopath who's too antisocial to adapt your behavior. Our side is the healthy side, and contrary to popular belief, we do a lot of self-improvement and self-care, such as psychiatrically castrating and sedating ourselves. Okay, we might have a statistic overrepresentation of suicidal people with terrible lives, but that's only due to how much harassment we get from being so well-rounded and in touch with ourselves. And by that I mean touching ourselves, maniacally flicking our beans whenever we can to get any kind of positive emotion. This can be literally or psychologically, in the form of watching hour-long apologetics videos from anyone willing to supply us with a narrative just sufficiently believable enough to soothe our cognitive dissonance. My favorites are H. Bomber Guy and Philosophy Tube, who are 100% organic, seeing as they randomly ballooned to millions of views and got mysteriously gigantic Patreons as soon as they began their de-radicalization campaigns. Clearly, they're shaking up the establishment, as opposed to internet personalities like Steven Crowder, who are in constant threat of being deplatformed. You can tell that the conservative Christian powers that be are just itching to take down the video essays that I use as a pacifier. I'm really glad they're still up on YouTube, because I need to watch political content for hours every day. Otherwise, I remember I'm alive, and the urge becomes unbearable. You see, much like 9/11 and the Holocaust, I'll never forget what I learned in my racist days, so I can't just become apolitical. When faced with things like 1350 and the bell curve, the only rebuttal is adopting schizophrenic revisionist narratives from the other end of the political compass. My mental gymnastics are advanced, so don't go thinking I'm like those boomers who believe everything CNN says, even though I pretty much do. But, like, I'm a dirtbag leftist, and unlike them, I found a way to put the cool conspiracy stuff like Pizzagate, Epstein, and the CIA to use. Usually, just knowing about it at all is enough to make impressionable people think you've already figured out how to integrate it into the worldview, and since they're desperate for any excuse to not be an alt-righter, you don't even need to debunk it, and they'll still be satisfied. However, if anyone investigates further, my favorite trick is, instead of focusing on the elites being Jewish, focus on them being rich. Never mind that the crimes are perpetrated by government officials and satanic pedophilia has no financial incentive. Whenever there are weird, unexplainable things like that, just call it late-stage capitalism, and everyone will pretend it makes sense and sweep it under the rug. Yeah, the Rockefeller-funded IPR promoted communism and JP Morgan loaned billions to the Bolsheviks. Who cares? It was obviously the invisible hand of the market that touched those kids. So what, the precursor to the CIA tried to defeat Hitler by putting hormones in his food to turn him into a woman? It was probably because they were transphobic. When elites agree with me or corporations promote elements of my ideology in their ads, it's just because they're trying to appease me, even though, since I'm the minority of the population, they get no reward for doing so, often losing money in the process. The fact is, I'm a victim of gang stalking. It just so happens that it's positive gang stalking, and large brands personally have me as the target of their virtue signaling, even though I'm an insignificant demographic. But don't worry, I won't be seduced that easily. As it turns out, my brain being completely smooth makes it an impenetrable shield to any kind of persuasive media. Even though I do watch every teen show like Euphoria that has me as its target audience, I'm unique, and not like other teens who take on beliefs because it's fashionable. My ideas are built from the ground up, not with platitudes, but with principles, such as feeling good, having friends, and enabling my sexual fetishes, which, for your information, came from a vacuum, and not from any pathologies such as resenting my dad for being angry or thinking my mom's attractive. A meaningful life always comes first, and I gotta say, I finally feel fulfilled and happy. That is, until I become suicidal, like the rest of the people that do what I'm doing. But that's a problem for future me to deal with. Sucks to be that guy.